Hello everyone and welcome to the Traphagen workshop. Today I'm going to discuss top wood or tone wood and which wood you should choose for your next guitar depending on how you want to use the guitar and what sort of sound you want. So the first thing I do is I decide once after speaking with the customer if we're going to use spruce or cedar or redwood or something along those lines. And let's say we choose spruce, and then there's many different types of spruce. You have Sitka spruce, you have Lutz spruce, which is a hybrid of Sitka and I believe white spruce, I'm not sure. You have many of the European spruces. You have Italian, German, from the old Yugoslav area, the Carpathian spruce. You have Engelmann spruce. You have Adirondack spruce from the U.S. The Engelmann spruce I use is primarily high mountain Engelmann spruce out of Idaho. It also grows in British Columbia. The European spruces I use are primarily Italian spruce from the Italian Alps and Carpathian spruce, which is the old Yugoslavian area. And then I'll use Adirondack spruce, particularly on dreadnought guitars for flat picking. And so once I decide what kind of wood I'm going to use, I go through several sets, and what I do is I will thickness and size each piece. So maybe I'll take 4 or 5 sets. Let's say I'm going to use Italian spruce. I'll take 4 or 5 sets, cut them all to the same size, then I weigh them. I put them on my scale and I weigh them. Because even though many of them even from the same tree, they will weigh different. So I will weigh them and mark down the weight of each one. Then I used to do a test where I suspended the top here, I put a dial indicator under it, and I put a weight here to see what the longitudinal, that's the lengthwise, what the longitudinal strength was. And then, once I've decided on the top, I'll join it together, cut it to rough shape after it's being weighed, and I'll put it on a form. This is a classical form, but I'll do this with many of my steel strings, whether it's a triple O or an auditorium size or a dreadnought. I'll put them on my form like this, clamp the top, put my dial indicator on it, set it to 0, and then I will put my weight right. The dial indicator is right where the bridge would go, and I put this right in front of it and see how much the top deflects. And I have a parameter, I have a range in there that's acceptable. I can usually tell just by flexing the wood though, and just by feeling it, what the deflection is going to be, and also how responsive it's going to be. You also can do the tap tone like this. You hold it in various places, because you'll get different tap tones. And then you hold it here. So I do the weight test, I do these tap tests and feeling it, feeling how rigid and stiff the wood is lengthwise and across the grain. And then I will do this displacement testing to see where it fits in there. And if all of that falls within the parameters that are acceptable from my experience of building guitars for over 45 years, I will know which woods and which set I will want to use for this particular application. Now, if it's a nylon string guitar, I know that people are going to be playing, if they're classical players, they're going to be playing with fingernails. If it's a nylon string sort of crossover jazz guitar, they're usually going to be playing with fingernails or just with flesh, but it's going to be finger style, finger picking. If it's going to be a steel string guitar, and you can have a finger style guitar, so it'll be very similar to classical, you want tops that are slightly lighter weight, that are more responsive. If it's going to be a flat picking guitar, you want a top that's stronger, a little bit denser and a little stronger. So I'm going to move this aside, and we're going to talk about the wood. Put this right here. So now, if you're a flat picker, you're probably going to want to use Sitka spruce. This is a very dark piece of Sitka because it's been torrefied. Torrefied means it's been heated under pressure, and it's sort of a way of aging. It's a fast way of aging wood. It's sort of all the rage right now, although with me playing with it, I haven't really noticed any difference in sound between that and wood that I've had in the shop for 30 years. That's been aging, but it makes it very, very dark. This was a piece of Lutz spruce. Also would be good for flat picking style guitar. It's a Sitka spruce hybrid. Some people say it's a hybrid with Engelmann, other people say it's a hybrid with white spruce. And all that's coming out of British Columbia. Your Sitka spruce, almost all of it's coming out of either British Columbia or Alaska. So that's where your Sitka spruce is coming from. I actually don't really use Sitka spruce much. It's not the tone that I like. For my steel strings, I prefer European spruce. And I tend to use Italian spruce, Northern Italian spruce, or the Carpathian spruce. This is a set of European spruce here. All these spruces will look very similar. You won't notice it on the video, how different they are, but most of the European spruces are very similar in density and in look. And often I'll have Engelmann spruce that I cannot tell the difference by looking at it, whether it's Engelmann or European. Now there's some Engelmann spruces that are extremely lightweight. They're very white. They'll often have brown streaks down the wood. There's nothing wrong with the brown streaks as far as the acoustical properties of the wood, but it's a cosmetic. Some people consider it a flaw. Other people like to use it for a dynamic look. So I tend to like clearer, cleaner tops, but it's totally not necessary. This is Engelmann spruce here. You can see there's these brown streaks. It's very common in Engelmann, but this acoustically is an excellent top. It's quite stiff across the grain, very stiff lengthwise, and lightweight. It's lighter weight. It's normally lighter weight than most European spruces. Not always though. Sometimes I have some pieces that are quite dense. They would actually work very well for steel string. I wouldn't use them on nylon string because they're too dense, which means the top will be too heavy. And with the very light string tension of nylon string guitars, it wouldn't be as responsive as you would want it to be. You'd have to make the top very, very thin in order to get it to respond. So that's why I always weigh the tops, because you need lighter weight tops for certain applications, primarily fingerstyle, and especially with nylon string. And then most fingerstyle players in the steel string world will play with light gauge strings, so you can use a lighter weight top than you would for a flat picking. So that's a set of Engelmann there with the streaking. This is a set of Engelmann, which is actually an Engelmann hybrid, which came out of British Columbia. This Engelmann here came out of around 6,000 elevation level in Idaho, which is somewhat unusual for it to be growing that high. It's terrific wood. It's fabulous wood. I purchased this wood in the 1980s, and I'm still using it. I bought quite a bit because it was such great wood. And I use it for double top guitars. I use it, the heavier, stiffer wood for classicals, just solid top guitars. So it's excellent wood. This was a hybrid. You can see it's a little different color. It's a little more yellow. It has, this is superb wood. It's a little heavier. So this would make fabulous steel string fingerstyle guitar wood. And it's a hybrid of Engelmann spruce and white spruce. And I purchased this wood again back in the 80s. And I still have some sets, and it's really wonderful wood. It's a little heavy for classical, but it's fabulous fingerstyle picking wood for steel strings. And then the wood that gets used a lot, even though the quality is not what it used to be, is Adirondack spruce or red spruce. So you would want to use Adirondack spruce, let's say for a dreadnought, or if you wanted to do an auditorium-sized guitar and you were going to do strictly flat picking. This is fabulous wood. Even though this is quite wide grain, way wider than we would consider acceptable in guitar making. It's actually fabulous wood. Actually, some of my favorite wood is medium to wide grain. And it's because it's normally very stiff, but it's lighter weight. And top wood is all about the strength to weight ratio. You want it to be strong, but lightweight. So this Adirondack spruce, what's really unusual about Adirondack spruce, it has the longitudinal strength is about the same as a lot of my European spruces, but the cross grain stiffness is more. Given the same thickness and the same size, it's quite a bit stiffer across the grain. It's pretty unusual, this Adirondack spruce. So even though this is very wide grain, this is superb tone wood. Now I know you might read, well, it has to be narrow in the middle and slightly wider as it goes out. That's really not true at all. Good tone wood can have quite wide grain. It doesn't really matter what it looks like, quite honestly. If you're just going after the tonal properties, if you want the aesthetics to be perfect, then that's a different discussion. But if we're just talking about tone wood and what makes wood excellent sounding, it's that the top is light, fairly lightweight, and stiff. So it has a high weight to strength ratio, which is very important in choosing top wood, and the kind of wood depending on how the guitar is going to be used. Now a lot of people are using cedar, and you'll have cedar in many different colors. You can see cedar is quite dark, brown. This has very strong grain lines. For cedar, it's pretty heavy. This would actually make very good wood for, let's say a triple O good guitar, or a double O. It would be an excellent choice for that for steel string. It's actually almost too heavy and dense for a classical or a nylon string, which is somewhat unusual for cedar, but this is fantastic tone. You can see it's quite dark. Now this is some spruce that is, or cedar, sorry, it looks like spruce. Fooled myself. Some people call it mountain cedar, but cedar comes in a whole range of colors. You've also probably seen cedar that's very streaky. Some people call it sinker cedar. There's also sinker redwood, where it's all kinds of stripes. You can use that for an aesthetic effect. It really has nothing to do with the tonal quality of the wood. And the color difference, some people think cedar is supposed to be deep red because it's called western red cedar. But it can be quite light, just like this. This side has been exposed to the light a little bit, so over time, all of these woods will get darker over time as they're exposed to the UV rays of just light coming in through the window. So this is lighter weight spruce and lighter colored spruce, or cedar. I keep fooling myself with this cedar. It doesn't matter what the color is. This is fabulous tone wood. Cedar is lighter weight than spruce, has phenomenal tap tones, a lot of sustain, which is why it works really well for nylon string guitars, because of it has quite a bit of sustain. And what that sustain does is it allows the sound, when it's coming out of the guitar, it allows the sound to bloom out so the player gets to hear more of the sound. Where spruce tends to project straight forward, so the player doesn't hear quite as much, but it has a very complex color palette, spruce. So cedar is a very rewarding sound for the player because they get to hear the sound right around them, and there's a little more sustain than spruce. Spruce will project more in a straight line, where cedar will come out and sort of envelop the space. So you can use cedar for steel string guitars. You just have to use a denser piece such as this because it's a bit more fragile. If you hit it, it will split easier than spruce will. So it's a little more delicate. It can also dent easier than spruce will. But it's a fabulous tone wood. It's been used since the late 60s, early 70s is when they started using cedar in classical guitars. Steel string guitars was a little later. But this is fabulous wood, and most of this wood is coming out of British Columbia. It's illegal to cut cedar trees now, so all of this wood is salvage wood. It's wood that's just been lying in the forest, where it fell over. Either the tree died, or it was windblown, or there was erosion and the trees fell over. I actually have wood that was driftwood on beaches on Vancouver Island, and which was obviously trees that fell in a river and then washed down river and went out to the ocean. That's fabulous wood. I have quite a bit of it, and but it's not easy to find. The Engelmann spruce that I talked about was also salvage wood, because it was illegal to cut the Engelmann spruce, so it had to be what they call windfall wood. So it means the wind blew the trees down in the wintertime, and then usually you go in and you get the wood and bring the logs out in the spring, but it's all salvage wood. Pretty much a lot of the woods I use nowadays are all salvage wood, rarely wood from trees that were cut live. Even the Carpathian spruce was often not cut live. It was also wood that was blown down, and then the trees were hauled out of the forest and cut up. The other wood that you can use is redwood, and you can see it's quite a bit redder than cedar. Redwood, again, is a tree that you can't really buy lumber from. This is salvage wood. This wood is over 100 years old. It was salvaged out of an old barn, and it's very much like cedar. It's lightweight, strength, strong, beautiful tap tone. It'll produce a guitar that's darker sounding, even darker sounding than cedar. Some people consider cedar guitars darker and warmer sounding than spruce guitars. That's not always true. Sometimes the trebles on cedar can be a rather glassy sound, especially if it's super hard cedar. But redwood will give you even a warmer, richer sound. Some people, it's too dark in the tonal color palette for a lot of people, but it's a fabulous wood. It's a little harder to work with because it's prone to splitting quite easily. So when you work with it, you have to be quite careful. You have to be careful with cedar as well, more careful than spruce. Spruce is a tougher wood. So we're gonna do a little summary here. If you're going to use the guitar for fingerstyle and your nylon string, you would choose a lightweight European spruce. You would choose cedar. You could choose redwood, or you could choose Engelmann spruce. For steel string fingerstyle guitars, you could use a dense cedar. You could use a denser Engelmann. You could use sort of the normal European, Italian, Carpathian spruce, normal weight there. And you could use Adirondack spruce, but Adirondack spruce really shines with flat picking. That's where it's the best, in my opinion, from my experience of working with all these woods over the years. And then if I have a chance, and if you ever go look at a dead tree and you're thinking of harvesting it, you want to see where it's been growing. The ideal is to have the tree growing in a flat area, not on a steep hillside. Because the wood on a steep hillside, the wood even from the same tree will be different. Imagine yourself standing on a hillside, and so your downhill leg has most of your weight on it, and your uphill leg doesn't have much weight on it. So it's the same with wood. The uphill side of the hill, of the tree, the fibers in the wood will be elongated. They'll be stretched this way. On the downhill side, because that's where gravity is pushing most of the weight, the fibers of the wood will be compressed. So if I have my preference, I want a tree that's growing in a flat area, so the wood on both sides of the tree is much more even. You also want to have wood that's in an area that's not super windy. If the tree's growing in an area where there's a lot of wind, it's going to twist as it grows. The reason it's twisting is it makes it stronger, and it can withstand the power of the wind blowing against it, so it makes the tree stronger. But that's not great for guitar wood, because then you have the grain in the top actually going across at an angle. So twisted wood that grows in a spiral is not good wood for guitar tops. Now you'll hear people talking about runout in wood. Now you rarely get runout if the tree, once it's cut and you cut it into large rounds that are about 2 feet long, if you split those rounds, rather than just cutting it in half and then start slicing, you'll get what's really called quarter sawn wood. So you split them into wedges, square up the edges, and then you can cut as you're going across the slice of the pie. So that keeps the grain straight up and down here, and it keeps it running straight along here. With runout wood, the grain actually, if on the edge, is actually going at an angle. So when you do a book match like this, and you book match them together, the grain on one piece is going to be going like that, and the grain on the other side is going to be going like that. Not necessarily desirable, but not always bad. If there's a very small amount of runout, it's quite all right. You'll see it in tops, where a top, when you reflect it like this, it'll be darker on one side than the other side, and then as you move the top, it changes and it's darker on this side than that side. That's because of the runout in the wood. You can build good guitars that have some runout in the wood. You just don't want it too severe, because it actually makes the top weaker on one side. It's not even. So runout's not really desirable, but it can be worked with. So that's about it for top wood. If you have any questions, you can talk to me. Email me at dake@traphagenguitars.com is my website. My email address is dake@traphagenguitars. And we can talk about woods for your next guitar and which one would be the most effective for the way you're going to play the guitar and the sound you're trying to produce. All of those are a factor when choosing the tone wood for your next guitar. So I hope you got a little information from this video, and if you have questions, feel free to contact me. Also, check out all the sound clips on my YouTube channel. There's some on the main page, but if you go on the side docket there, you'll see the library, and you click on the library, and there's lots of sound clips of people playing various kinds of guitars, classical guitars, various types of steel string guitars, and you get an idea of what my guitars sound like. So I'm hoping that this was helpful, and contact me if you have any questions, and thanks for visiting Traphagen Guitars.